Hey everybody, it's Corporal Speculation, and I am bringing you my most recent thoughts on the affordability crisis. So let's get into it. It's kind of wild to me to see this issue take off in the way that it has. I've been a deficit hawk for years. I remember thinking that Mitt Romney was going to balance the budget if he could just beat Obama, all the way back when I was just getting out of high school. And I don't think that would have happened now. But I remember seeing a lot of the problems that when it was really starting to kick off and thinking that this is going to pile up into something terrible. And so it's kind of surreal for me to look at the current situation in the economy and see it actually happening, and that things really have gotten as bad as I thought that they might. And that we're kind of staring down the barrel of the gun of the affordability crisis getting a lot worse and inflation getting a lot worse. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of where we're at. But just to give you some basic numbers, the CPI, which measures inflation, says that inflation is up 564% in the last 50 years. That's insane. And I got to tell you, I think it's higher than that. I think that they game those numbers to try and keep it lower than it actually is, but even as a kid, I remember you could go to McDonald's and throw $5 at the dollar menu and walk away with, 2 McChickens, a fry, and a Coke, and eat like a king as a 17-year-old where I grew up in my hometown, and that was the situation everywhere. And now, that same meal's probably gonna run you, it's been a while since I've eaten at McDonald's, but I'd say probably like $14, something like that. And it's really, really tough as things get more and more expensive. And I think that we start to reach kind of a fever pitch, and that's why people are so angry with each other right now. To make an analogy, it'd be like if you were like lost in a cave, and there's you and 15 other people, and you come to an intersection where you can go right or left. You guys might fight pretty viciously about which way to go to get out of the cave, but it's not necessarily that you hate each other. It's that people are freaked out. People are scared. People are seeing prices shoot through the roof, and they don't know what's causing it, and they just want somebody to fix it for them. And I think both sides are kind of being a little bit misleading here, the politicians, and saying that they're going to resolve these issues. I mean, there's nothing Mandami in New York City can do to solve this problem, or the governors in New Jersey and Virginia. Their number one campaign issue, and they're not going to be able to solve the problem. Donald Trump ran on reducing the inflation and getting things back to normal the way he could do it. You know what I'm saying? The only ways to do it is, to jack the interest rate up. Now, that's what Faulkner did in the 1980s to 20%. And I'm telling you, if we went over 2%, it'd kick off a nasty depression. So we're in a really bad way here, and the problems have really accumulated to a point where they're out of control. And, it's got to be solved at the federal level because what's causing it is we're just printing too much money. And if there's more and more and more and more money, then prices are going to go up, and that's really the cause of a lot of these problems. In the 1970s, that's when we came off the gold standard, and this became a thing that we could do more of. Not to say it didn't happen before, but had to be a little bit more secretive about it. But right now, the heads of the banks make up the board of the Federal Reserve, and they print as much money as they want, and that money enters the economy however they want it to. My guess is through the banks that they own. And then the first people who get it are the corporations or the richest people who can get these low interest lines of credit and, pay it back and are the most reliable. And the way counterfeit money works is it's bad because it reduces the value of money, but it's good for the person who uses it because that takes time. It's a lagging effect. So the longer the money's in the economy, the more the prices rise. So whoever gets it first is really the ones that make out, So that's just kind of food for thought for you, and I'm seeing a lot of people and just kind of a lot of confusion about it, and I get it, it's confusing, But on the left, they think it's corporate greed is a big indicator or cause. I'm not even really sure what that means, corporate greed. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to get into specific policies, I mean, for sure, the idea that, corporations get these massive subsidies from the government. I mean, certainly that's an example of corporate greed, but that's money just being printed and sent directly to them, the regulatory capture, where an industry will go to Congress and lobby for more rules for their industry to make, competition harder is another factor, But overall, I mean, there's just nobody's really writing prescriptions that's going to save us in this situation. It's a very difficult thing once a currency starts really heating up to resolve it without a lot of pain. And like I said, you could go ahead and jack that interest rate up to 20%. But even that, you're just going to see lower inflation. See, that's the thing a lot of people also don't understand about inflation and the affordability issue is it's cumulative, right? So even if we got the number way down, it was like 7 during COVID, 7% inflation, and now it's all the way back to £2 or 2%, but that would be like me saying, oh, I gained 7 pounds last month and only gained 2 pounds this month. So actually I'm losing weight. Like, no, that's not losing weight. That's still me putting on weight, And if I had gained, 560 pounds since the 1970s, I'm probably in pretty bad shape health-wise, And that's kind of where the country's at, as we've put on a lot of weight, in this inflation. Things have gotten a ton more expensive. Wages haven't kept up, and we're just in a really tough spot. But we're praying to false priests in this, Nobody's really got answers. I mean, the Democrats want to, push through the Obamacare subsidies. What is that? That's a bailout. We're just going to send the health insurance companies a big blank check, to knock a few bucks off the top of everybody's health insurance premiums. So that way they don't get mad at the federal government. I mean, cool, I guess. I'm sure that they'll honor this arrangement indefinitely and not raise rates in 2 or 3 years as soon as everybody's forgotten. My gut says that's probably what they'll do. I mean, but that's just a huge cash influx to the health insurance companies. And printing the money is what causes the problem at the beginning, And then the Republicans say, tariffs are going to do it. Tariffs are going to, help with the affordability crisis. And it's like, how? How is raising the cost of foreign-made goods going to lower the cost of goods in the United States? I mean, just connect the dots for me. You might hear raise taxes on the rich. That'll help. Again, how does raising taxes reduce costs? How's that ever worked out? It doesn't. None of that works. All the big talking points from both sides, they don't work. And then every single time somebody comes in and they outspend who was before. Trump spent more than Obama, Biden spent more than Trump did in his first term, and Trump in his second term. I don't think he's going to spend more than Obama, but that was or Biden, but that was because of the COVID-19. But the big beautiful bill was to continue Biden era spending, which was COVID era spending. We can't even cut back to pre-COVID levels of spending. That's why your inflation's so high, right? Because if all that money is roaring into the economy all the time, then the cost of goods are going to continue to go up because the value of the dollar is continuing to plummet, And, everybody's running on reining this in. And I think that there's a little bit of a lie in there. I think if you talk to people, and what they want, or even what they need is to have spending go back to 2020 levels, right? That's what we need, What we want is for spending to go back to 2015 levels, and the costs of everything to go back to 2015 levels, and what we'd love, I think this goes for everybody, is for spending to go back to 2010 levels, or costs to go back to 2010 levels, and be able to pay for things like that, But the reality is that's not how inflation works. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it doesn't go back in. Deflation is a whole different thing that most economists agree is bad. Not the Austrian school. I'm in the Austrian school, but the Keynesians don't like deflation. I think we could probably use some deflation, to be honest with you. But if you want deflation, if you want things to get cheaper, you got to remove money supply. You got to start dropping zeros off the back of your currency, and that's tough. That's really tough stuff. I mean, that's really, we're talking about a nasty depression if we go down that route. Even raising the interest rates to a point to slow the inflation down would probably kick off a recession. If you start voiding part of the money supply, it would kick off a nasty depression. But it's tough. I mean, I think that's what we need. It's unfortunate, but they say let the tough times come during our time, so that way it doesn't come in our kids' time. Somebody's going to have to deal with this sooner or later, and I think hopefully maybe we can avoid some of the pain of it. Hopefully we just default on the debt and then, void out the dollar and go back to a backed currency. I mean, that's really the only sustainable way to do it. And then run the country on a balanced budget, But if sans that, if we're not going to do that, then this is what's coming. It's just a reality. There's only so much money that you can print before your currency starts to hyperinflate and you start to see 10% a month or 15%, 100% a year, 500% a year. And the whole system is unworkable. People will start reverting to a barter system. There's only so much money that you can borrow before the interest rates are too high. And the only way and we're already here, pay the interest on the debt is by printing more money, which is causing more inflation. There's only so much you can tax the populace, before you really start running into huge problems. And I think we're pretty near the max on all of that stuff. So the next time, somebody's telling you that they're going to rein in the affordability crisis and get the cost of goods back down, ask them how. Just ask them how. How is it going to work? Walk me through the steps and how it's going to bring costs down, because I don't think it is. And realistically speaking, it's important right now to look at it and look at the problem and see if we can't ease our way out of it before we hit a full crisis. But I think the crisis is coming, and anybody in Washington, D.C. who's throwing mud right now over affordability or inflation, I mean, you know what they say, you point your finger and four more point it back at you. And that's so the reality here is everybody in Washington is guilty of this. The money printing is out of control. The budgets are way too big. And that's why everything's so unaffordable. And if somebody's telling you that they're just going to rein in pricing, I mean, how? What are you going to do? I mean, you could put pricing caps on things, but that always, it's never worked in the past. It's just, if you have bad money, you have bad money. You have a ton of inflation. That's the economic law of it. Fiat's never worked. A backless currency's never worked, and it's always worked out this way, So those are kind of my thoughts on the affordability crisis and inflation. Feel free to hit me up in the comment section. I know it's kind of a bleak topic, but, I do think it is a thing we can get through, A lot of current countries have done it in the past, and, realistically speaking, you just got to get back on a backed currency and start, keeping government spending below what they take in, run it like any other organization. And then you can enter an economy where there's no inflation or there's even healthy deflation as innovation takes off and the overhead to create goods gets lower. So I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom. I think we're probably accelerating to the worst part of this experiment. And then, we're going to come out the other side and be in a much better spot. But yeah, that's all I got, everybody. I hope you have a great day. If you like my content, throw me a like, a subscribe. If I'm wrong, throw me a comment. If I'm right, throw me a comment. And you guys all have a fantastic Thursday. And, happy Friday Eve.